I think is admirable about Zimbabwe is the Academy for Vulnerable Girls. And I'm sure, Merit, you have now included vulnerable boys as well. The work or the initiative of a young athlete who started as a vulnerable, child, went to the extent to establish an academy which is extremely successful. And that is how we should empower, our vulnerable people. Revenue allocation, Merit, our CEO from SASCOC will do a presentation and she will lead the way on what is SASCOC doing that make them so successful with revenue, allocation. And then also, Merit, the way you involve your national federations in the promotion of gender equality is also commendable. Madam Chair, I think this calls for another another topic that we really need to address, the last point that she mentioned. How do we support the female that we got into those leadership positions going forward? Because once they get into those leadership positions, this is where they really, really need support. And I think, if we open up that, we will get brilliant ideas from this floor. We're not going to, my friend here said to me, okay, let the program flow. Let's do and achieve what we need to achieve. Our very last presentation from our countries, last but not least, Botswana. Table.
Good afternoon. My name is Tebo Segaisi, the chairperson of the Botswana National Olympic Committee, Gender Equality, Inclusion and Diversity Commission. We are still a crawling baby under the capable hands of Madam Chair Hazel and Madam Bigger Chair Matlohang, who have been walking this journey with us, and I wish to express my gratitude to you for hand-holding up to now and urge you to continue doing so. Ladies and gentlemen, following the 2023 Anoka Gender Commission forum held in Cape Verde, we got inspiration and we started off with we had a gender commission conference this year, which I would say was a great success, thanks to all the players involved. Chairperson, thank you for your support. Zone 6 Chair, in this instance, we are grateful, and all those who managed to attend virtually. We had support from the IOC, which carried us through. And it was, I would say, it was a huge conference, and the success was enormous. And it was held under this theme. I will not dwell much on it, as the focus were on the five focus areas, and we had set out objectives with which we wanted to achieve what we planned for. And I will not go through them and say we were able to achieve some of the objectives that we set for ourselves. And now, with that done and achieved, our focus now is on the action plan, which we got from our conference. We came up with the implementation plan of what we are going to do in order to achieve our set goals. And we have already started the ball. The ball has started rolling in that regard. And we are grateful that, or we are hopeful that in the coming quadrennial, we will be able to achieve most of what we set up for ourselves. What we require, as I said at the beginning, we are a new baby. What is required is for us to, as the BNOC, to have gender equality coming out clearly from our strategy, as the BNOC is now working on the strategy for the next quadrennial. This is one of the key areas, because it will be upon the BNOC to execute that which it has committed to, if it is included explicitly in the strategic plan. We do appreciate, as the Gender Commission, that in Botswana sport leadership, especially at BNOC level and our sister organization, the Botswana National Sport Commission, we do have 50-50% representation. But this, I would say, it just comes by luck. If the members decide to move away from it, we will find ourselves back to where we used to be. There is no clear policy that speaks to the quotas in leadership for both the NFs, the BNOC, as well as the BNSC. So this is one of the responsibilities that the Gender Commission is really trying to embark on, coming up with a policy that will speak strictly to that. And we also call for alignment of the gender equality policy to the national safeguarding policy, which we have started conversations around them. But we do hope that in the coming quadrennial, the gender or the safeguarding policy will be realized. I will draw attention to the Paris 2024 Games team and team composition. And I would like to lament that as a country we saw a drop in both in numbers of sporting codes that represented us in Tokyo as opposed to those that represented us in Paris. As well as a drop, we also realized a drop in the number of female athletes. We only had 2 female athletes against 12 male athletes. And one of the female athletes came through universality. So this says to us there is need to embark on plans that will ensure that LA, we see participation of women. So we were badly hit. We were badly hit in that area of participation. If we look at our team composition as well, we can see that there were more males, especially single out the sport of athletics, where we had 11 male athletes and 1 female athlete. There was no female official from athletics. So this is an area that we would request and we would require the BNOC to be strategic about and ensure it does not recur. For we know and appreciate the role that the role that are played by both men and women in the team management and team leadership. We did try, as the BNOC, as the appointment of the CDM, the medical personnel lies with us. We were more skewed towards the female representatives, as we can clearly see the CDM, the Chief Medical Officer, among other officers, were female. And one area where I would also say we experienced challenge, we were forced to double the roles of the psychologist and that of safeguarding. We do know the challenges that may pose. Of course, she's a psychologist, but a psychologist has ethics that they subscribe to, confidentiality, but then we also gave her that responsibility of being the safeguarding officer. So that is something that will be corrected going forward. And the composition of the board, I clearly wrote that down for our appreciation. We appreciate the 50% representation of women, but where are the women found in that structure? The president is a man, the senior vice president is a man, the first vice president is a man, and then the lower positions, they are the ones that are occupied by the women within the board. So the quota or the policy that I spoke to earlier will definitely have to address these and ensure there is alignment to what we are expected to do or expect to see happening. And the challenges, I have been stating them throughout. We do have a big challenge on resource allocation. What we realize is resources or funds are distributed equally. But in our case, our male athletes who have been in the international stage, they have advantage. They do have advantage and get more resources from sponsors within the country, and internationally they do get sponsors. Whereas our female athletes only receive funding from within the structure as we allocate. There is no intention, and we need to see clear intention on upgrading, and probably, if there is need, give more to the female athletes. Maybe we will see a change or improvement in representation going forward. And we do believe that achieving gender equality requires the engagement of men and women, girls and boys, as it is everyone's responsibility. And we hope and believe that if we hold on to this together as an NOC and as Botswana Sport, we will see great improvement. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Tebo. Research possibilities. They are really concentrating on research, which is extremely important for us in our gender equality commissions. And we need to tap into the opportunities provided by the IOC through Olympic Solidarity. And Tebo, I must commend you for aligning your gender equality policy to your national safeguarding policy. That is really commendable. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes, the presentations from our country representatives, and I'm handing over to my brother.
Obrigado. Thank you, Joanne. Antes de continuarmos, permitam-me fazer uma pequena correção de um pequeno erro na abertura do nosso evento. Era simplesmente para sinalizar que dentro das representantes da Associação Mulher e o Desporto de Angola, também está na sala a representante da Lunda Norte, que peço que se levante, por favor. Obrigado. Está também a representante do CUNEN. O que quer dizer que temos 17 representantes das nossas 18 províncias. Dando continuidade ao nosso programa, gostava de convidar também a Kennedy. Hazel, come to me, please. Joe, please, Ian. Peço desculpa por furar ligeiramente o protocolo. Queria simplesmente dizer que estas duas senhoras que representam a nossa zona têm sido o suporte desde a criação da agenda, todos os arranjos que fizemos ao longo do dia. Por isso peço uma salva de palmas para essas duas senhoras. Ok. Prontos, dando continuidade então ao nosso programa, o tema proposto é boa governação e administração, partilha de boas práticas. Vocês devem estar a reparar no horário, estava proposto ser das 13h45, das 11h45 às 13h, para depois irmos para o período do almoço. Mas já concertei com essas duas senhoras que nos estão a ajudar no suporte e no arranjo da agenda. Vamos salvaguardar a mesma 1 hora do almoço, porque a hora prevista para o último tema seria para terminarmos por volta das 16h30. Por isso, o tempo que utilizamos agora mais, vamos compensar no final da tarde. Por isso, se calhar agora vamos ultrapassar um bocado as 13 horas, dependendo da apresentação que vamos fazer, mas dizer que está salvaguardado, quer com a Kennedy, quer com a Joe, já salvaguardamos a agenda para no final do dia fazer a devida compensação. Para este tema convido então a senhora Landry Simelan. Boa governação, administração, boas práticas, estatutos dos comitês olímpicos, planos estratégicos 25-28, termos de referência para a igualdade do género, monitorização e avaliação. Miss Simelan, you have the floor, please.
Okay, good morning yet again. I'm going to have a discussion and a presentation around good governance and administration, particularly around how good governance can be a tool to assist us in achieving gender equity. Okay, there's some fun facts. I don't know how fun facts can be, but these are some fun facts just to get us started. Okay, well, good morning. I know that we all need a bit of a break. Life is stressful, you know, but when we can get the issues of good governance sorted, then our lives will be a little bit better and our lives can be protected and safeguarded within the statutory environment of your organization. Right, the presentation will look at the building blocks, which are the NOC statutes, which are, if you review your strategic plans from 2025 to 2028, as well as terms of references for gender equality commissions, as well as monitoring and evaluation. So the discussion will be around how these elements can be the tool Okay, so question time. When you think of governance, what comes to mind? Anybody? It's an interactive session, or otherwise it's going to be a very tough hour for you. Yes? Okay, making sure that we are applying the rules. Good leadership. Structures are in place. Regulations and policies exist. You know, Musama, I should rather just go sit down. Okay. This is an Olympic sport that I like participating in. I think I would be a gold medalist, Mematlohang, in this particular Olympics code. Yes. All right, so I've got a definition for us here that we can use from the EU Principles of Good Governance in Sport. All right, and this says that it's a framework and the culture within which a sports body sets policy, you guys mentioned policy, delivers its strategic objectives, engages with stakeholders, monitors performance, evaluates and manages risk, and reports it to its constituents on its activities and progress, including the delivery of effective, sustainable, and proportionate sports policy and regulation. Right, so all of the concepts you guys raised are correct. They form part of what a good governance environment would look like. Right. They form part of what a good governance environment. I can only unfortunately speak of what I know of, which is the organization that I come from. So we'll give you a case study of how our regulatory environment and the amendment of our constitution has assisted us in maintaining and keeping 50% representativity in our board as well as all committees of SASCOC. All right. So you can see there we have a total of 86 members, which are national federations as well as provincial sports confederations, which are the bodies that represent sport within the provinces. Okay? Of that, only 14 presidents are women. Of that, 86. 14 presidents are women. 6 vice presidents, of which I am one from my sport of field hockey. 37 secretary generals. Sounds about stereotypical, right? 4 chief executive officers, 4 female CEOs in the whole of South Africa, 5 general managers, and 7 administrators. Yet, we have 50-50 on the board of SASCOC and 50-50 on all committees and commissions of SASCOC. What do you think creates this? Serious gaps, yes. Anybody else? Alignment. Not having consolidated ideal. South Africa stipulates 50%. When you go to the National Federation, they'll tell you the IF only requires 30%. Because that's what the IOC requires. All right, so when you then come in and you go, but guys, the country says 50%, then they go, well, I can't go against the constitution of my IF, which then gives them an opportunity to create this situation for us. Okay. I think we're stuck here. There we go. Ooh, now I've gone too far. Sorry, guys. What's happening? No, it's paging itself. Not touching it, it's moving though. You have to go all the way back. More. 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 Yeah. So the next one from here. Will this work now? Okay, can you go back then? Inch it backward? Yes, that's what I was pressing. Is it the battery? So apparently it's the battery. Yeah, that's the next slide. No, back. Yeah. Can you, yeah. Is there no way I can move it from there rather than?
Yes, you can change.
So I can indicate to him, okay, then I can. Okay, sorry, the clicker is out of battery and it keeps moving forward. Okay, yeah. So next one. Thank you. So what we need to focus on is National Olympic Committee statutes. Because if the rules are not in your statutes, then they're actually not rules. And anybody can do whatever they want, whenever they want. So if you look at why getting your statutory environment is important, the first reason being that a statutory environment allows you to set the tone with anti-discrimination clauses. So immediately once your statutes are anti-discriminatory, then the behavior in the organization has to be in line with the statutes. For example, the founding statement of SASCOC's constitution stipulates the South African Sports Confederation, Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and all its members commit themselves to a unified system of sport based upon human rights, the principles of equity, of diversity, of non-racialism, and non-sexism for all sports people, for all sports persons. So already in the opening line of our Constitution, it's clear that discrimination will not be allowed. And it is against the principles and the ethos of the organization. And it is the law of SASCOC. It's not an opinion, it's not an idea, it is the law of SASCOC. Next page. Right, so as you see, this clause then sets a definitive tone for all of us to understand, and we already understand the intentions of the Constitution from line 1, that we as the people of SASCOC adhere to diversity, to equity, and etc. It then further goes in 12.3 to say that we take appropriate action against any form of discrimination, violence and abuse in sport, corruption, illegal baiting, manipulation of matches and competitions, and etc. Then it says 12.4, it will then also take appropriate action against non-compliance with Sport SA's safeguarding and other policies. If you do not have a safeguarding policy at SASCOC, you will not qualify to re-attain membership. It is a constitutional imperative for all national federations and all members of SASCOC to have a safeguarding policy and to administer a safeguarding program. Last year at our AGM, we suspended 8 national federations because they thought we were joking. 8, with a smile on our faces. Right, next slide. All right, so women belong in the kitchen, men belong in the kitchen, everyone belongs in the kitchen because the kitchen has food. So the NOC statutes also then assist us in establishing gender representation targets. Now this is where it's important, because everybody and anybody can say that they are pro-gender equity and pro-gender equality, but the proof is always in the pudding. So my head is clearly in the kitchen, because the proof is then in the actions and in the behaviors. Next slide. SASCOC intentional. 30.1.1 of the SASCOC Constitution clearly stipulates there shall be the following board members, of which at least, which means at least the minimum, must be women. It is enshrined in our Constitution, it cannot change. In fact, if on the day of the election you do not carry 50%, you cannot constitute the board of SASCOC. Cannot, without 50% women. Right, it further then goes, actually we're so serious about this thing that we're not just going to say 50%. We want opportunity, but quality of opportunity is just as important. And the Constitution stipulates any one of the president or vice presidents shall be a female. And should the vote dictate a male being elected as the president, then the first and the second vice will automatically be a female nominee. It is the law of SASCOC. I am here thanks to that law. Right? We then even extend these protections to the Athletes Commission, where we then say the Athletes Commission must have at least 3 of each gender of the 10 persons they must elect on their Athletes Commission. Okay. Are you guys with me? And the importance of statutes. Next. Okay, selection policies are also critical in assisting us as a tool. Right? Now, we understand for things like Olympics, qualification is king. Right? If you don't qualify, you don't go. However, within our selection policies, we have certain controllables. We can control the doctors, we can control the managers, we can control the chef divisions, we can control the coaches. They don't need to qualify. They don't need to run a time, swim a time, jump a height. So you also need to have intention in your selection policies that where you can control, you are at all times gender responsive. Okay, next one. Okay, equitable resource allocation can also be safeguarded by looking at your statutory environment. Okay, your statutes can include provisions that require equal distribution of resources. One of the biggest we have, especially in the athletes space, is equal pay. Equal pay will not happen unless it is legislated. Cricket South Africa last year took a decision that all contracted cricketers, irrespective of gender, will be paid equal match fee and will be paid equal value in contract. Right? They were asked why, and because whenever everybody makes the case for equal pay, they say, well, the women's sports don't generate revenue. Cricket South Africa's perspective was that, well, they would have been generating revenue if we didn't keep them out of the sport for all of these centuries. Therefore, it is our responsibility to give them an opportunity to create their own revenue by first apologizing to them by the years we left them out. And today, by the way, our women's cricket team were back-to-back T20 finalists because they are living in an environment of equality. Back-to-back T20 World Cup finalists. Next. Okay, it also, the NOC statutes then also aid in helping us make sports safer. I didn't really say too much about this. This is Malebu stuff. These special people are called to these things. And we don't really, but as we were showing you how important it is that safeguarding has been taken so importantly that you cannot attain or retain membership at SASCOC if you do not adhere to creating safe spaces for your participants. All right, question time. If you were writing a statute for gender equity, what's the one thing that you would include in your country? Okay. Okay, that's an interesting point. When we were doing the constitutional review at SASCOC, we received a question because we used he and she a lot. And then we were asked, does that mean if you do not identify to he or she, you cannot contest for a position on the board of SASCOC? We then started using the title. So we'd say president, vice president, second vice president, board member, instead of he, she, they or them, to ensure that we do not highlight it to belong to any particular gender. And we believe very strongly we have the most gender responsive constitution in sport. We believe very strongly. We are happy to be corrected, but we believe very, very strongly in that. And that is why we've removed the use of pronouns completely to allow for those who identify however they identify. Right. So I understand when you say woman, female, etc., but we just said remove it all because the president is the president, and you need to be in a world where you can fathom that when we say president, we also mean a woman. Naturally so. Mm. 100%. Anybody else? What other statutes would you consider? Anyone, think of what maybe you could, what your constitution in your country could benefit from right now. How many constitutions safeguard a percentage for women? How many of your constitutions safeguard at all? It was an uphill battle. It took us about 5 AGMs until we finally carried the vote to get this constitution across the line. 3 years, CEO. 3 years. And we finally got this constitution over the line with full support. What was it? No objection. What do you call no objection? Unanimously, yes. And then eventually, 3 years later, unanimously the guys had come to the party and understood exactly what we were saying. So it is extremely, extremely critical for you guys to consider this as a process for yourselves. Next. Okay, so how do we build this strategy, this statutory environment? I don't know how much the composition of our constitutional task team assisted, because it was obviously chaired by a woman, and there were about 3 women and 2 men. So yeah, I don't know, maybe we bullied him a bit, President, in the meetings there. But I think it is creating an inclusive policy development process. When we did our constitution, we introduced the process called town halls, where we took the constitutional draft, we separated the members into like groups of 10, because sometimes when they're in plenary, they influence them each other. So we separated them into groups of 10 and had contact sessions for about 3 hours on the Constitution with each of them, with each of those groups individually. We then collated all of the views and opinions we received, and we created a mass document which then came out with the final draft document, which included, and it was the most consultative process in SASCOC history for amending its constitution. So each and every single person cannot deny this. They had buy-in in it, they participated in it, they were part and parcel of the process from beginning to the very end. And from beginning, I mean, they selected the constitutional task team. It was selected by the General Assembly. We were all nominated from within their membership. So it was an owned process, and absolutely nobody questions the concepts within the statutory environment of SASCOC. Okay, so establishing these statutes, you need to have an inclusive policy development process. You have to involve women, right? We also ensured that disabled women were also part of the process, because we also wanted to have an intersectional constitution. An intersectional constitution means it addresses you in all of your forms. right? What do I mean by it addresses you in all of your forms? This Constitution protects me as a young black woman. So it addresses me in all of my forms. In the form of my race, in the form of my gender, and in the form of my age, which would essentially be considered protected classes in the Constitution of South Africa. So why we say our constitutional is intersectional, because it speaks to all of the natures of the protected classes within South Africa. So if you're a woman, you are protected. If you are disabled, you are protected. If you are black, you are protected. If you are young, you are protected. If you are old, you are protected. So it is intersectional across beginning to end. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Thank you. Next one. Thanks. Yeah. So, reviewing your strategic plan, which we do obviously each cycle. So our strategic plans would expire now in this end of the Olympiad of 2024. We would then need to have new targets from 25 to 2028. Why is that important for us to do? It allows us to benchmark where we are, right? So we showed you our strategic plan. When we close off the year, we have to set how much of this did you achieve? Where are you still short? Where do you need to apply all of your energy in the next Olympiad? We are short here on participation, then that's where we need to focus. So it allows us to ensure that we are benchmarking our process, our progress properly. It also allows us to analyze the key performance indicators, all right? And then it highlights the areas where initiatives seem to be under-resourced. All right, if I have to highlight it on a high level for South Africa, women coaches completely have to focus on that area. Leadership and representativity within our national federations, when we benchmark, we have to highlight that area. Next. All right, it also allows us to define responsibility. I also know for a lot of your countries, you don't have the system we have, where SASCOC is everything in one. All right, you guys still have sports councils and the Paralympic body is separate, and the CGA and the IO and the NOC is separate, whereas SASCOC encompasses all of that in one. All right, so it's important for us in our statutes to ensure that responsibilities are clearly defined. Equally so in the organizations that have that disjointed structure of many or organizations existing together. You have to define roles and responsibilities. And at the end of the day, the custodian, according to the laws of South Africa, the custodian of sport in South Africa is the National Federation. Everybody and every institution and every entity needs to support the National Federation in delivering sport, not the other way around. Right, but that's the law in South Africa. So that is why it is important for us to define responsibilities. And when we review our strategic plan, we then see if some of the things that we gave ourselves responsibility the last 4 years were even to deliver on. In South Africa, when we address our government, there's this term we like to use on certain things, which is an unfunded mandate, where you have placed something in an act or in a policy that we are required to do, but you then didn't put the money next to it. So how then must we deliver on it? So those are the types of things that when you review, you can look at. You can see which were our unfunded mandates, which mandates were given to us correctly, and which mandates were just never for us to do, and now we spent 4 years letting government get off the hook. For example, in South Africa, we're very clear. We do not write national acts and laws and legislations. That is the responsibility of government. We have been in the process together with ourselves, and they have consulted us. They again used our town hall system that we have now developed for them to come and consult with our members on the women in sport policy that will then be passed by the Parliament of South Africa. So we are in the process of passing that legislation. But again, we were clear on whose responsibility it is. It is government's responsibility to make that legislation, and it is our responsibility as the sports sector to guide them on the input and the actual facts and the content, because we are the experts on the matter. Right. Yeah, I think we went back. Okay, forward again. Thank you. It also allows us to align with international standards and best practice. When you run reviews, things in the world change day in, day out, which is why you need to make reviews, because there could be great ideas. Is it okay now? Thank you. So there could be great ideas that are existing somewhere, somehow, that we do not know of, but when we able to review our strategies, we're able to look at that. We're able to integrate lessons and best practices from other organizations that are actually successfully advancing gender equality. And it is for that reason, if I can announce, Chair, that South Africa will be bidding to host the International Women's Group for 2030 and to host the chair and the secretariat of that body, because we believe it's important for us to be successfully speaking and in the center of it as Africa on the gender discussion globally. So, and as reported to the gender chair of ANOCA and gender chair of the zone, when South Africa wins this bid, it is going to be Africa's bid. And we consulted them and got our blessing from them first as the Gender Commission to ensure that they know that we will be walking this path with each and every one of you. You'll all be required to support the organization with programs, and the organization will have to support you with programs. Because if we do get, when we do, CEO, when we get this bid, it has to grow Africa as the center for gender thought in the world. And long may that live, because right now we are suffering with Eurocentric gender ideals and our views and our opinions are not met. So I hope we have your support in that regard. Thank you. Next one. Oh, it's me now. Sleeping on the job. Hey. There we go. Ah la la. Ah, we're back, my brother. We're back to the same problem. Yeah. All right, thank you. Terms of reference for commissions are also important. In terms of reference at SASCOC, we have it as part of one policy. All right, so we've incorporated it as a policy document, and in that policy document sits the terms of reference of all commissions and committees. Why did we do that? Because it needs to get authority within the regulatory framework of SASCOC. Can't just be an idea document in a corner. It is now a policy, these commission terms of reference, which means it is policy at SASCOC to follow the objectives that the Gender Commission has agreed to and adhered to. All right, because we have made it a policy document, it now forms part of our governing and legislative framework. Okay, so it's not just, we don't just set up commissions for fun. What the commissions do is part of the strategic plan and the laws and the rules and regulations of the organization. All right, so the terms of reference allows you to clear the objectives and understand the focus areas. All right, so we get to align with broader organizational and societal gender equity standards. One of the reasons why we put certain things in place and why we found it important to have a written strategic document as South Africa was that a lot of the time, a lot of things were just happening and it would move with the flow. The next gender chair would come and do their own thing. And it wouldn't align with what was being done 4 years ago. And then the next one who comes will come and spend a whole 4 years wasting our time again doing their own thing. Now we have a document that sits within our legislative framework, which means whoever comes in after me must follow this. If not, then they must go through that long mountainous route of getting it changed, which is also the beauty of safeguards of legislation. Legislation can't just be changed overnight. I can't sit as the vice president in my house and go, I think this one should change. There's a whole process that you'd have to follow, and that is why you need to secure things in statutes. You need to secure things in statutes. Next. All right, it also clarifies the roles and responsibility, but it also, here's the important thing, is point 3. Because the Commission's terms of reference are statutory, the CEO cannot deny us money. unless she doesn't have it. But she cannot, ideally, deny us money in the budgeting process, because we are delivering a strategic arm of the organization and a legislated responsibility of the organization, which means we don't play unfunded mandates at the Gender Commission. Sorry, CEO. I know, I always have the highest budget. She cries whenever I come. Okay, so that is a very important thing to note. Do you see now, because it's in my statutes, when the Finance Commission goes to do the budget, women must be counted. It's law. Okay. It also provides us with a platform. So now the Gender Commission is the identified platform on all matters of gender. If anybody wants anything or is invited anywhere to go and speak on whatever, they come to the Gender Commission first and they receive the one line of march, based on the strategic plan and based on the statutory environment. So everybody plugs and plays into it because it's codified and because it was made within a unified environment. Next. Okay, now how monitoring and evaluation then assists us as well in creating a good environment for gender equity. It sets and it tracks gender-specific goals. All right, so we know our goal is 50%. When I opened the slides with you, I showed you exactly where we are in terms of this is how many CEOs, this is how many this is how many that. It's because we're continuously doing monitoring and evaluation. Right? I think every 6 or so months we ask, because national federations elect. Right? They elect at different times and we request at all times. So sometimes a new woman would be elected, but then one would go out. And a CEO gets fired, one gets employed. So those are the types of things that you need to continuously monitor, because you need to all times know exactly where you're standing. Next. Okay, monitoring and evaluation also increases accountability within the organization. If you know you're going to be checked 99.9% of the time, you're going to do the job, unless you're really, you trust yourself. Otherwise, if you know monitoring and evaluation is coming, then you understand that you will be held accountable for the responsibilities that were given to you. And the Commission will be held accountable for whatever in our strategic plan that we could not attain or get to or meet, etc., etc. All right, so it helps us foster a climate of accountability, and a climate of accountability within a good governance organization is important. Next. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Apologies for that, but thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. When you spoke about the statutes, you were very deliberate about the intentions of speaking about representation and ensuring that female or all-inclusive identities are included within the structures. But what I wanted to know is that how do you then ensure that in as much as the representation of female is there, that it is not just a matter of tokenism, as opposed to actually having women that bring something to the table and that their voices are heard? How do you ensure that that is attained, as opposed to just having the numbers and ticking off boxes in accordance to that? Thank you. We govern that again by a process of good governance,
which is called the Nominations Committee. So our board is elected via a nominations committee. Right? Nominations committee receives our nominations and vets each and every one of us on a set criteria by the Constitution and by what I didn't mention actually incorrectly is that as part of this constitutional process, we also made history by delivering to SASCOC 7 brand new bylaws, which never existed before. 7 brand new documents that govern such things such as nominations and elections. All right, so we now have a bylaw specifically for nominations and elections, and we have a nominations committee that ensures that each and every person who is nominated meets the criteria. Does that answer how we ensure?
My question actually builds onto hers. So I'll kind of frame it differently, but it's the same question. It's about not just getting those number of women there, but getting women that can actually contribute something. So my question will actually be, did you have some kind of a baseline before to see that, say there's federations, for example, because you're saying SASCOC and its bodies. So this doesn't apply only to SASCOC, but to the national federations and all of that. And because I saw that the discrepancy that you have is similar to Lesotho, there at the board level, you have your 50-50, but then you presented to us how there's that discrepancy when you take it down to the level. So my question now is, did you do some kind of a baseline to see that those women even exist? Because it's one thing to put it in the statutes that it is a must to have this percentage or that percentage, or that if a president is a male, perhaps vice presidents should be females or something of that nature. Did you do a baseline to check that they even exist, so that you don't go to the elections and there are bylaws to talk about how you nominate and how you fill the positions, but there is nobody to actually be nominated to fill those positions? I don't know if the question is aligned to yours. Did you see that they are there to make these laws to force them to then stand up for these roles?
Yes.
Does that, or do you need to rephrase your? Okay.
Not really rephrasing. I think in terms of the nomination, it is clear, it is fine. But for me, it's that in terms of the voices actually being heard, as opposed to just sitting around the table, because the nomination criteria can be clear that we have Justine present, but when I sit in the space and I sit around the table, how sure are we that whatever Justine brings to the table actually also matters, as opposed to just Justine's face being there and I can then tick and say that yes, we have Justine on the board. For me, it's just about the voice.
I think the environment is very different for us. I mean, we've got our elections in November, and it's a long line coming out of the door downstairs, even there, of people who want to join the SASCOC board. So I don't think for us it was a need to do a baseline study. The women are sitting in the 76 national federations in some capacity or another. They are sitting within our provincial structures in some capacity or another. The other side of that discussion that we have very vociferously, I'll say, as South Africa, and as the women in South Africa, is we don't kind of take kindly when the question of merit is raised when we have to speak about securing spaces for women. We don't ask how many men are ready, but for some reason we are asking the women whether they are ready or not. And it's quite an unfortunate situation. At the end of the day, democracy is democracy, and I can't campaign for you. You must campaign for yourself, and you must be worthy in your own light. But what we need to always fight for is that if we're discussing merit, then merit needs to be for each and every one. That's why when I initially answered your question, I spoke of the nominations committee, because man or woman must pass the threshold at the nominations committee and be worthy to stand for election. It then becomes your responsibility to go and tell them. I campaigned on the platform of governance. I'm a company secretary by profession. I have my qualifications in place to do the work I do, and I delivered a constitution and 7 brand new bylaws. But if I allow that conversation, I must then allow men to ask whether I was worthy for my role or not, which I think is not fair.
Yeah, great presentation. I think good stuff coming out of there. I think that we can all try and use. Just my thought around, I'm not sure whether it's Article 3, on your 50-50 representation, including women. Believe you me, there's a time coming that there will be more women on this. Will you then change that statement? Because the reference point here is woman. Okay, perhaps you might think for the future to change that so it covers both, such that if it's the male that are lesser, how does that speak into that that clause? Because specifically, yes, I know you are trying to elevate women, but I'm of the view that we need to consider both situations and move them. Get the men to support the women so that we don't begin to say gender means woman. Gender means that we must bring both, well, I'm saying both anyway, genders into perspective on equality. Because what has happened in the last few years since Beijing is that programs away from governance issues are now for the girl child, and the boy child has been left hanging. And they are beginning to be a nuisance in society because nobody is paying attention to them. So one day they will not be able to be strong enough to be in leadership. The women will take over completely. So we need, as perhaps in the next time you're changing this, can you cover that in that particular part? It's just my comments. Thank you.
It's a fair point. I think if we have to discuss in our 2020 election, on election day we elect 8 members. And on that day, we elected 5 women. Right? So 5 women in 2020 came through the ballot, 3 men. The rest of the men were co-opted. First in history where men had to wait for us to co-opt them. They had to wait for us. Whereas usually it's, no man, ladies, wait, we'll co-opt you. So our first 2 co-options were the positions of the independent. Our constitution requires 2 independent members, one with financial skills and one with legal skills. We then co-opted 2 brilliant black women to serve in that position. Then we said, shame, man. These guys, man, let's co-opt 2 guys. Then we co-opted 2 men onto the board. And as I said, first time in Saskok's history where men had to wait to be co-opted and not the other way around. So it does work when you legislate in a way or sense, but it also shows the quality discussion. Because on the ballot, everybody in the hall felt that of the candidates there, 5 of the women were the best. Without question, without debate. And in fact, it was the first time ever that we had 2 female vice presidents. So there's a lot of change that getting people to accept constitutions and a statutory environment organically also makes them understand that this is how we need to be approaching elections and certain things. Okay. Bonnie?
Sorry, there was a part I forgot just to ask. In your statement of if the 50-50 presentation at board level does not exist during the AGM, there will be no board. And in reference point, obviously, I'm thinking of the women. Suppose it's the other way around. Will you carry through the board?
Yes, we constitute the board. We constitute the board because South Africa has a policy of protected classes. Women, disabled, members of the LGBTI, black South Africans are all constituted as protected classes. So our, what do they call them? Empowerment policies are based on those protected classes. So we do not write policies of empowerment for classes that are not protected. White men, and men in general are not part of the protected classes in South Africa. So until such a time as we've reached a developmental stage where they no longer qualify as protected classes, then your discussion would kick in. Unfortunately, once they still form part of the country's wholesale empowerment program, then there will be no legislation for men and for the white citizens of South Africa who are currently seen as holders of the privilege in the majority, being men as well as white South Africans, as well as the able-bodied. So the disabled are also protected across that empowerment policy of the country. So it was important for us to realize we're not an island west of South Africa. We have to fall within the lines of the programs of South Africa and the laws and legislations of the country. And therefore we approach our protected classes in that manner. Okay. Cool.
Wandi, thank you so much for an extremely comprehensive presentation. Mr. President, what I take from Wandi is that our Gender Equality Commission chairs need to be board members of NOCs, because that is around that table that change will take place. Then we will be able to achieve what SASCOC achieves when we have a voice on the NOC board as part of the decision, making process, and as part of the execution process. Because we see the impact in SASCOC, in every single structure, in the policy making, the decision making. It is because of the representation. And Justine, I think I'm kind of responding to your concern, because a Gender Equality Commission chair can be somebody outside the board and try, do a reporting. But around that table, this is where it takes place. Even with the funding of the programs, the execution of an action plan. We in Anoka Zone 6, we say you must have an action plan which conforms to your NOC statutes and the Anoka Zone 6 action plan. And this is my big thing. We can only make an impact if we now talk to our NOCs and make sure that our Gender Equality Commission chairs become part and parcel of the executive committee, the executive board of an NOC. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again, Wandi. If there's any questions that you have, Wandi is with us until the end of tomorrow. She will facilitate another session also later this afternoon. Immediately after lunch, we're going to have our SASCOC CEO that will tell us a little bit more about marketing, the funding side of things. So we are going to break for lunch for an hour. We all need to be back at 2:30. Thank you so much for a very successful, I think, morning session, Madam Chair. So enjoy your lunch. We will be back at 2:30. Thank you.
A Comunidade Sul-Africana da Igualdade do Género, trazida aqui pela representante deste país da África Austral. e a culminar também com esta sessão no período da manhã. Portanto, foram aqui espalhadas as razões pelas quais a África do Sul acabou por quase atingir a meta preconizada em relação àquilo que é a igualdade do género. Portanto, a África do Sul com números bastante animadores. Termina assim a sessão do período da manhã, vamos para o intervalo que vai culminar também com o almoço. As sessões regressam às 14h15 depois do almoço para mais 2 a 3 painéis que vão certamente trazer a realidade da África no que a igualdade do género diz respeito, e a TV Belas vai estar aqui também a acompanhar o desenrolar desta atividade neste dia de quarta-feira, 13 de novembro de 2024. Fazemos um ponto e vírgula, voltamos no período da tarde para mais sessões, mais explicações em volta da igualdade do género no que ao desporto diz respeito. Boa tarde, até daqui a pouco.